When building the school, Paris Center, many years ago, going through that process, costs were escalating, which should not surprise anybody if you've had anything to do with building. The money was at a very clear level. We had sold the 1 acre of property for $13 million. When I tell most people that outside of Vancouver, they go, whoa, really? When you say that in Vancouver, it's like, so? Right? You all know what I mean. But still, $13 million, it was at a kind of high point in the market. We were so blessed to be able to sell that for that price. And the loan level was $7 million, not a penny more. I asked the Archbishop several times. I refused to plead, but I asked diligently and assiduously, no. $7 million, 14-year amortization, not a year, not a day more. Okie dokie. So the costs were escalating. We had about, I don't have these exact figures here, but the cost of the building at that time was about 19 to 21 million. We had 13, and then we had the loan, 20, and then we had donations and wills, so about 21, 22. So we were doing pretty good until the cost started going up and up and up and up. Again, if you know anything about building, you know what this dreaded term value engineering means. I had to sit with these individuals who this was their bread and butter stuff. They knew this terminology. They go through every item in the building, and the way I had to translate it from my simple mind was, we perhaps had a Lamborghini material, now we have to go to a Camry material, and hopefully it's not going to be a used car model material. So you got to change materials, grades of windows, and all this kind of stuff. 3 times we had to do this. So the daycare at that point was going to be an empty concrete shell, because we did not want to rent it out to a third-party provider. And the kitchen, which is the kind of the prize of the Paris Center, simply not going to be there. Didn't have the money. So stress, just a little bit, because I had to go forward. And they were saying, well, you just have to do this. You have to get the daycare and the kitchen after you build the building. And I thought, easy words to say. The building is built, we got a $7 million loan, the kitchen ain't going to happen. At least that's the way I was thinking. Daycare is not going to be there for like ever, because it was at least 1.5 million, maybe 1.6 million to build the daycare. Stress, just a little bit. But I had to go forward not knowing the outcome. And it was just downright tough. I sometimes minimize this stuff, and it's not because I don't want to show weakness. It's because of I don't want to be, at times, or at least from my perspective, I want to keep my ego in check, because you know sometimes when things are really tough, things really kind of suck, and you have to be so careful that you are not doing the wah-wah trip. You know what the wah-wah trip is? Like, poor me, poor me. And so people are patting you on the back and saying, you know, poor father, poor father. It's part of the package. So I always trying to keep my ego in check, because I have an ego like everybody else. It's not, you know, sometimes, you know, I'd like the poor father, but I really don't want that. So maybe, you know, sometimes I downplay it, but my sleep always told me that this should be taken seriously, or my lack thereof. So trusting is not easy, stress was there, and as a result, I'll go into a few details about this, but it clearly affected my sleep patterns. But the Lord gives us real life examples that we should trust Him, not just in the good times, that's easy. When it's easy, it's easy. No problema, right? That's about as much Spanish as I know. And that's not even a word as Father Sora used to remind me. I think it's problemo, or no problema is the right word. So we have to look to these real life examples to encourage us, because the stress doesn't just, we can mitigate it, but we just can't eliminate it. And for you young people, sometimes young people want a stress-free life. That's not realistic. It's not realistic, and if anybody ever says anything different to you, they're lying. You can't have a stress-free life. What's important is to realize, and this is really about trusting in God, but this stress thing is huge in people's lives. Some stress is good. It's like exercising. It's like a muscle. We need stress. Other stress is bad. The worry. We just get obsessed with worrying. And then, we have to distinguish between those two things. A lot more could be said, but I got to be pithy about that. Question boils down to, can I really trust God? And you might find that strange coming from a priest, but last time I checked, same skin as you got, right? I have certain amounts of faith, that help me through this, but it doesn't take away the fact that at times I question, Lord, okay, if you want me to trust you, then what's your timeline? It would at least be nice to know your timeline, because it doesn't seem to be in accord with my timeline. So there's that debate that goes on, at least between me and God, probably you in your own way. We're trained to hedge our bets. We're trained to stay in control. I mean, who wants to be out of control? 100% agreement. Nobody wants to be out of control. We want to be in control. And we want to protect ourselves from risk. I think because of original sin and our own personal defects, we are almost born risk aversion. And yet we have to take some risks. There's a process for another day to go through to assess whether or not this risk is something worth embracing. And when it comes to giving of our time, our energy, our hearts, we often hesitate because giving requires trust. It requires trust. Trust that our time will be spent well. Trust that if I give you my heart, you will not abuse it. You will not use it for your own selfish ends. So we have trust difficulties. It's always been there, but I think young people have it even more because they see a lot of trust being broken through the media, social media, and so on. So it's really affected young people. That's why I feel an obligation to show young people that people are trustworthy. Not 100%, not in this world. Only God is totally trustworthy. But people can work at trust. We ask ourselves also, what's the value in this when I give my trust? We want to know this. The readings of the day show us real-life examples. Real-life examples, it's important for us to remember, real-life examples of people who put their trust in the Lord. A case in point was Saints Paul and Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas risked everything for the Lord. Paul says in the first reading, the kingdom of God is not achieved without, difficulties, trials, and tribulations. He probably had scars and, he was bloodied up because the town he was in before, they stoned him. They stoned him, and actually he was taken for dead. So this man paid the price for Jesus, physically as well as emotionally. He was abandoned by many of his friends at times. And he risked everything. When they return, they don't talk about this stuff. They don't go on and on about it. Paul at times does note it, but he doesn't sort of wear it out, as it were. But rather he says he gives this important teaching. God has opened the door of faith. He's used all this. Is my trust in God eroded? Paul would say, no. It's not easy at times, but no. God uses all this to open the door of faith. God invites all of us to something so much bigger than we can see. But the door only opens when we trust him enough to walk through it. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Peter, remember he was in the boat, and I saw one of those boats when I was in Israel, blessed to be there, going on 3 years now. They're about this wide. Remember that wingspan when you want to sell tickets. They're about this wide. So these men are in this boat, and they're fishing all night on the left side, presumably because this guy on the shore They don't know who it is. He says, put your nets to the right side. That makes no sense at all. No fish here. Are they going to swim under the boat and go to the right side? And he's all night. Peter knows where to fish. Peter's a fisherman by trade. Why should I do this when this produces nothing? They don't know who he is. But he obeys. He listens. He does it. And then the miracle occurs. And then John says, it's the Lord. They didn't see him before. They didn't make him out. Now you say, well, maybe they moved closer. No, I think first time they didn't move a whole lot between put your nets to the right, doing it, catching the fish, and John says, it's the Lord. Point here is that he trusted, then the miracle occurs, then they recognize the Lord. That's the pathway it is when it comes to Jesus Christ. Often we don't, but we want to see the outcome before we begin. That's our struggle. Sometimes it's what really holds us back. We want to see the outcome before we begin. And that's okay when we have a puzzle, 1,000, 2,000 piece puzzle, dump it on the floor, look for the corner pieces, and then try to fill it in. But everybody looks at the picture. Everybody looks at the picture to see the outcome. That's okay when it's a puzzle. Life doesn't work like that. And God almost never works like that. He rarely tells anybody what it's the full outcome of listening to me and obeying me now. In the gospel, we see Jesus about to be betrayed, the greatest example of all. And yet he talks about glory and gives the commandment, love one another as I have loved you. He knows Judas is going to betray him. He knows he's going to be captured, tortured, and then crucified and die the most horrible, painful death known in that time ever. And yet he speaks of glory and love. Why? How does he do this? And please do not dismiss this by saying, well, he's God, it doesn't really matter. If you and I experience the pain that Jesus went through for probably 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it would kill us. Because he was taking every sin upon himself from Adam to the last person who will be conceived before he returns in glory. And he was taking that all upon himself, aside from the sheer physical pain of the crucifixion. He was able to do this because he had total, absolute trust in his Father. And trusting in God means that we believe he's at work even when we feel life is unraveling, when life is coming down on us, and in those moments we are so subject to the enemy because he has no mercy on us. He actually wants us down, feeling defeated. There's no answer, there's no solution. And that's precisely when many of us succumb to the temptations, when in fact God says, I am with you in the valley of darkness. Don't fear. I'll help you get through this. But we have a difficult time doing this. Regarding the story I started with, we kept the project going, obviously. We have the facilities. Although I was fighting discouragement, and the money did come in, I didn't see it. I didn't know that it would come in. I had to step out in faith or trust and keep going. However, my sleep patterns have not returned. Stress, as they say, the stress is the silent killer, but it's also the sleep stripper. And it strips you of your sleep. And sometimes the patterns go back to normal. Mine don't, or haven't anyways. I know what's looming in the future. I told Archbishop Miller, he took this so well, I said, Your Grace, if you move me, that's your prerogative, but I will never build again. That's what I told him. I said, with one exception. If I get the opportunity and the next bishop agrees to it, then I'll do a Corpus Christi. But I will never do a building again. Partly because of the stress, but also it takes years to form relationships. It takes years to get to know people and to work with people and so on. These things just don't come out of thin air. And so this looms, and of course I still worry, stress over it. And yet I know that God helped us get through that, or the school. And if we get to do this, and it needs to be done, God will get us through that as well. And so this still translates to me welcoming a new time in the day, and that's 3 a.m. when I wake up. And I've learned to try and say, Lord, thank you if I don't have temptations, because 3 o'clock in the morning, many temptations come. No temptations, okay. I try to get back to sleep, say Hail Marys, think about the gospel of the next morning. I think about being in the chapel. I have my own ways of trying to deal with that. But many times, I don't get back to sleep. And there are times when it doesn't really bother me the next day, and other times my body feels like 1,000 pounds. And if you go through this, you know what that feels like. Your head is just like, you know, and your body's like, and I'm in pretty decent shape, but stress, stress, stress. So where does this all land in your life? You know, what about you? Because we all struggle with this. And this isn't really just about me. It's just I don't want to, this is just honest me. But I want people to benefit from this lesson that the Lord is trying to lead us to consider. Where is God asking you to trust him more right now? Maybe there's 5 areas, but there's always one that stands out. We all have one or perhaps many areas where the Lord is calling us to trust him more. What fear is holding you back? What door of faith have you been afraid to go through? You don't have to take a giant leap today, but you can take one step, just one step. Spend 5 minutes. I invite you to spend 5 minutes every day this week, 5 minutes every day, asking God one question. Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more? Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more? Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more? I submit if you spend the time, 5 minutes every day this week, keep asking the question, something will bubble to the surface. It may already be there as soon as I mention this, because usually we take this stuff with us all the time, or it takes us with it. You know, it's always there. I'm here. I'm not going to let you forget me. It's always there, right? So, but write it down, capture it, write it down. You see it. Do it on your phone, do it on paper. Sit with it. Let it become your prayer. And even you can pray Psalm 23, because sometimes we feel like we're in the valley of darkness. Life is just coming down on us. We don't know how we're going to get through it. Even though I walk in the valley of darkness, I fear no evil, because you are at my side. He doesn't get any answers. He doesn't think about the psalm. He doesn't get any answers. All he gets is an assurance of God's presence through this difficult time. So, this is the daily trust challenge. Lord, 5 minutes every day this week. Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more? Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more? Lord, where are you calling me to trust you more?